stories. The Solomon Island has denied proposals by Australia and others its policing deal with Beijing is a threat to the Pacific region peace and says China will increase the capability of its 1,500 police officers in cybersecurity and community policing. The United States, Australia, New Zealand and Solomon Islands opposition party have called for Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare to immediately publish details of the policing deal signed in Beijing on Monday amidst fears it will invite more regional contest. Sogavare's office in a statement on Friday said the Pacific Islands nation was expanding its security partnerships and Chinese police will add to the existing Australian and New Zealand policing support. Penny Wong, Australia's foreign minister, said she had conveyed Australia's clear views on security in the Pacific in a meeting with China's top diplomat Wang Yi in Jakarta on Thursday night. Solomon Islands government fails to see how the improvement of Royal Solomon Islands Police Force traffic control and management system in Honiara, provision of police equipment, or the completion of the forensic autopsy lab is a threat to the Pacific region peace and security, said the statement from Sogavare's office. Riots in the capital, Honiara, in 2021 exposed gaps in the island's policing, it said. Australian and New Zealand police deployed to the Solomon Islands in response to the conflict at Sogavare's request and formally led a decade-long international security force to preserve peace after the internal unrest. Sogavare announced Australia's security treaty will be reviewed in the week before his China visit. Opposition leader Matthew Wally said in a statement, policing is different in democracies than in communist countries and democracies must uphold human rights and due process. Meg King, director of the Lowy Institute's Pacific Islands program, said the issue was not China's supply of security equipment, but the compatibility of Chinese and Pacific policing. In his visit to Beijing this week, his first since agreeing on a security pact with China last year, Sogavare promised support for China's Global Development Initiative and Global Security Initiative policy, which pair Chinese infrastructure investment and security. The Solomon Islands has a population of 700,000 people spread across an archipelago that occupies a strategic position in the Pacific and was pivotal to the U.S. move west to liberate the Philippines in World War II. Tensions over Taiwan have raised concerns in Washington and Canberra over China's naval ambitions in the region. Our fear is that in the near future, China's interests will clash with U.S. influence and strategic interests in the region, and we are right in the middle of it all, opposition leader Wally added. United Nations have gotten approval by the Syrian government to use a border crossing from Turkey to continue delivering aid to opposition-held northwest Syria for another 6 months after the Security Council failed to renew its authorization for the operation. According to reports, Syria's United Nations ambassador Bassam Saba wrote in a letter on Thursday to the Security Council that the United Nations aid deliveries will have to be in full cooperation and coordination with the Syrian government. On Tuesday, Russia blocked a 9-month extension of a major Syrian aid route at the United Nations Security Council, throwing the vital mechanism that provides life-saving support to millions of people into doubt. Moscow instead suggested a 6-month extension. However, that was also rejected by the Security Council, with only Russia and China voting in favor and the United States, the United Kingdom and France voting against. The United Nations brokered agreement that permits the delivery of aid overland from Turkey into rebel-held areas of Syria expired on Monday. The Security Council has long been divided over Syria. Most members support cross-border operations, including the US and the UK, which have called for a full-year extension, while Russia has insisted on just 6 months. The 15-member Security Council had been discussing a text to let the United Nations operation, which allows for food, water and medicine to be transported to opposition-controlled northwest Syria without the authorization of the Syrian government to continue using the Bab al-Hawa crossing for 12 months. But Russia, which backs the government and has fought in the war in Syria, put forward a rival text proposing 6 months on Friday. The cross-border authorization has for years been renewed for 6-month periods, but the short time span leaves Syrians in opposition areas fearful that they are liable to be cut off from life-saving aid at short notice. The crossing provides for more than 80% of the needs of people living in rebel-controlled areas, everything from diapers and blankets to chickpeas. The government in Damascus frequently denounces aid deliveries as a violation of its sovereignty. February's massive earthquakes that hit southern Turkey and northern Syria uncovered the delicacy of the cross-border mechanism and added scrutiny of the United Nations humanitarian mission in Syria. Russia has been fragmenting away at the aid mechanism for years. The accord initially permitted for 4 entry points into rebel-held Syria, though now only the Bab al-Hawa crossing remains penetrable. On politics, said Aung San Suu Kyi, the elected leader who was detained by the military when it seized power in February 2021 and subjected to a series of secret trials, is in good health. In a brief statement, Myanmar on Friday, Information Head Major General Zaw Min Tun confirmed Thailand's outgoing Foreign Minister Don Pramudwinai traveled to Myanmar on July 9th and met Aung San Suu Kyi, adding that she was in good condition. It is the first time the military has permitted a foreign diplomat or politician to meet her since the coup, despite repeated requests. The 78-year-old is being held in a prison in the capital after being found guilty of crimes from corruption to breaking official secrets in a series of closed-door trials widely seen as a sham. Leader of the information team of the State Administration Council, Major General Zaw Min Tun, described the meeting between Don and Aung San Suu Kyi as free and said it lasted for 90 minutes. The SAC is what the coup leadership calls itself. Don traveled to Ne Pundwa days before foreign ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, were due to deliberate the worsening crisis at a meeting in Jakarta, raising worries about recent efforts by Thailand's outgoing military-backed government to push re-engagement with the ostracized generals. Briefing the ministers in Jakarta following his trip, Don said the visit was an approach of the Friends of Myanmar, who would like to see a peaceful settlement. ASEAN, which Myanmar joined under a former military administration in 1997, has banned the country from its main summits because of the general's failure to implement a 5-point consensus FPC agreed upon with coup leader Min Aung Hlaing in April 2021 to end the violence and resolve the crisis. The plan calls for constructive dialogue, an instant end to violence, the appointment of an ASEAN special envoy, a visit by an ASEAN delegation to meet all concerned parties, and the provision of humanitarian assistance. ASEAN officials have not been permitted to meet Aung San Suu Kyi despite frequent requests, and the crisis inside the country has only deteriorated since the consensus was agreed. At the end of their meeting on Thursday, ASEAN foreign ministers acknowledged the briefing by Thailand on its activities in Myanmar and said that a number of states saw Don's visit as a positive development. However, it reiterated that the FPC remained the foundation of their diplomatic initiatives to resolve the crisis and strongly condemned the continuing chaos. Now to Russia-Ukraine war, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said he offered Wagner mercenaries the chance to continue serving together in Russia after their mutiny last month against Moscow's military leadership. On Thursday, Putin said his offer was one of numerous he made at the meeting with around 3 dozen Wagner fighters and their founder Yevgeny Prigozhin, 5 days after Wagner forces stated a short-lived revolt last month. Under Putin's offer, the mercenary force could remain serving under their present commander, who reports identified only by his call sign of grey hair. Kommersant said Putin spoke of meeting 35 Wagner fighters and Prigozhin in the Kremlin and offering them options for the future, including remaining under their commander of 16 months. However, Prigozhin disagreed, it reported. Prigozhin said after listening, no, the boys wouldn't agree with such a decision, quoting Putin. Putin also indirectly admitted that the Russian leadership had been relying on a private military organization that operated beyond the scope of Russian law. He said there was no possibility of Wagner remaining in its current form. Wagner fighters played a major role in the Russian army's advance into eastern Ukraine and were the driving force in the capture of the city of Bakhmut in May after months of battles. But Prigozhin constantly accused Russia's military chiefs of failing to back his men and of even cutting his allocation of artillery shells and other munitions at key times in the battle for Bakhmut. After months of verbal attacks on the military hierarchy, Wagner fighters crossed from Ukraine into Russia and took control of the southern city of Rostov-on-Don on June 24th as other units made a dash towards Moscow. But the Wagner mutiny ended as abruptly as it started when Prigozhin, only 24 hours into the mutiny, announced that his forces had halted their advance after being offered a deal under which they could resettle in Belarus and criminal charges against them would not be pursued. Still on Russia-Ukraine war, Russian President Vladimir Putin has said foreign-made tanks are a priority target for Russian forces in Ukraine, and the supply of Western weaponry to Kyiv will not change the course of the war. Putin, in his comments on Thursday, also reaffirmed his stance that Ukraine's membership in NATO will threaten Russia's security, while the provision of Western arms had only intensified world tensions further and prolonged the conflict. When asked about France's decision to supply Ukraine with long-range cruise missiles, which can travel 250 kilometers, 155 miles, Putin said, yes, they cause damage, but nothing critical happens in the war zone with their use. The Russian leader added that foreign-made tanks were a priority target for our guys. On Thursday, Putin's comments came as U.S. President Joe Biden said that Russia had already lost the war in Ukraine and expressed hope that the ongoing, though slow-moving, counter-offensive by Ukrainian forces will push Moscow to the negotiation table. Putin's already lost the war. Putin has a real problem, Biden said. Biden told a press conference with Finnish President Sauli Niinisto in Helsinki there is no possibility of him winning the war in Ukraine, he added. Biden also used his visit to Finland, NATO's latest member, to pledge that Ukraine would one day join the alliance, despite NATO's leaders failing to give Kyiv a membership timeline at a summit of the Western Military Alliance this week in Lithuanian capital Vilnius. NATO leaders had dashed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's hopes for a clear path to joining NATO, saying that Ukraine will join when conditions are met. Biden was more upbeat about Ukraine's NATO membership on Thursday. It's not about whether or not they should or shouldn't join. It's about when they can join and then they will join NATO, Biden said of Ukraine. Putin's comments on targeting Western tanks and warning on growing military assistance to Kyiv were his first public response to the remarks made at the NATO summit. He also reiterated Moscow's strong opposition to Ukraine ever joining the defense bloc, saying this will threaten Russia's own strategic interests. On more stories, India set to launch historic Chandrayaan-3 to moon. India is set to launch its third moon mission, targeting to be the first to land near its little explored South Pole. The Chandrayaan-3 craft with an orbiter, lander and a rover is due to lift off at 14:35 on Friday from Sriharikota Space Center. The lander is due to reach the moon on 23rd to 24th August, space officials said. If successful, India will be only the fourth country to achieve a soft landing on the moon, following the US, the former Soviet Union and China. The third in India's program of lunar exploration, Chandrayaan-3, is expected to build on the success of its earlier moon missions. It comes 13 years after the country's first moon missions in 2008, which carried out the first and most detailed search for water on the lunar surface and established the moon has an atmosphere during daytime, said Muthuswamy Annadurai, project director of Chandrayaan-1. Chandrayaan-2, which also comprised an orbiter, a lander and a rover, was launched in July 2019, but it was only partially successful. Its orbiter continues to circle and study the moon even today, but the lander rover failed to make a soft landing and crashed during touchdown. It was because of a last-minute glitch in the braking system, explained Mr. Annadurai. Indian Space Research Organization ISRO Chief Sridhar Panika Somanath had said they have carefully studied the data from the last crash and carried out simulation exercises to fix the glitches. Chandrayaan-3, which weighs 3,900 kg and costs 6.1 billion rupees, that's $75 million US, has the same goals as its predecessor to ensure a soft landing on the moon's surface, he added. Graphics showing how the Chandrayaan-3 will get to the moon from takeoff to orbiting the Earth in phases until it reaches the moon's orbit, when the lander will separate from the propulsion module before landing near the moon's south pole. The lander, called Vikram after the founder of ISRO, weighs about 1,500 kg and carries within its belly the 26 kg rover, which is named Pragyan, the Sanskrit word for wisdom. After Friday's liftoff, the craft will take about 15 to 20 days to reach the moon's orbit. Scientists will then begin dropping the rocket speed over the next few weeks to bring it to a point which will permit a soft landing for Vikram. In Africa, Tunisia, two opponents of Kais Saied released. A Tunisian judge freed two leading political opponents of President Kais Saied closely 5 months after they were detained on suspicion of plotting against state security, their lawyer Monia Bauli said according to reports. On Thursday, Kaima Issa and Lazar Akremi were released on following their detention in February along with 20 other political leaders in a crackdown on the country's opposition. Both were charged with conspiracy against state security. Issa is a leader in Salvation Front, the major opposition coalition to Saied, which has organized protests against him over the past 2 years. Akremi, a lawyer who served as a minister after Tunisia's 2011 revolution, has been a prominent critical voice against Saied. Before the judge's ruling, dozens of prisoners' families protested near the court in Tunis, holding up pictures of the detainees and calling for their release. After her release from prison, Issa chanted, "Down with the coup, down with Kais Saied." The defense team for Issa and Akremi said in a statement that the probing judge decided to release Kaimi Issa and also responded to the defense committee's request for the release of Nazar Akremi. The appeal court judge refuted the team's request for the release of other political opponents. The major opposition parties have decried their leaders' arrest as politically motivated, and rights groups have urged authorities to free the detainees. Saied has described them as terrorists and traitors and says judges who free them will be abating their alleged crimes. Saied froze parliament and sacked the government in a dramatic July 2021 move against the sole democracy to emerge from the Arab Spring uprisings. He ruled by decree from September 2021 to March 2023, which he claimed was necessary to save the country from chaos and corruption. El-Sisi states measures to end Sudan conflict. On Thursday, leaders from Sudan's 6 neighboring countries met in Egypt's capital, Cairo, for the most high-profile peace dialogue since fighting broke out across the northeastern African country in mid-April. The meeting, hosted by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, was attended by the leaders of Ethiopia, South Sudan, Chad, Eritrea, the Central African Republic, CAR, and Libya. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said, and I quote, "We express our deep concern about the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Sudan and condemn the repeated attacks on civilians, healthcare facilities, and public service outlets. We call upon the international community leaders to intensify efforts in providing necessary humanitarian assistance and address the urgent severe shortage of food and medical supplies in Sudan as a measure which reduces the serious repercussions of the crisis on innocent civilians." Thursday's meeting comes weeks after discussions involving the U.S. and Saudi Arabia in the city of Jeddah broke down after both sides continually failed to stop fighting and violated ceasefire agreements. An agreement has been reached to form a ministerial mechanism regarding the Sudanese crisis at the level of foreign ministers of neighboring countries. Its first meeting will be held in Chad to take the following steps: put in an executive work plan that includes practical and implementable solutions, stop the fighting, and reach a comprehensive solution to the Sudanese crisis through direct communications with the various Sudanese parties in coordination with existing mechanisms, IGAD, Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and the African Union. The RSF Rapid Support Forces and Sudan's military have agreed to at least 10 ceasefires, many of which were brokered during the Jeddah talks, concluded Egyptian's president. Sudan has been hit by violence since April, when tensions between the military and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces erupted into open fighting. I'll bring you more stories just in a moment. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Stories from Nigeria says food security, Tinubu declares state of emergency. President Bola Tinubu has declared a state of emergency on food security in the country. This was sequel to observe food inflation across the 36 states of the Federation and Abuja. Mr. Dele Aleke, the special advisor to the President on Special Duties, Communication and Strategy, revealed this on Thursday after a meeting of stakeholders on agriculture and food production value chain at the State House in Abuja. Giving details of the presidential intervention on food security, food pricing and sustainability, Aleke disclosed that steps in the action plan will include an instant release of fertilizers and grains to farmers and households to cushion the impact of the subsidy removal. He also said the president has approved that all matters relating to food and water availability and affordability as vital livelihood items be added within the purview of National Security Council. And finally on the news, federal government to pay 8,000 naira to 12 million households monthly. The federal government of Nigeria has finished plans to make a digital transfer of 8,000 naira to over 12 million low-income earners in Nigeria to aid mitigate the effects of subsidy removal, which has been prices of commodities triple in recent weeks. Earlier, it was reported that the Senate on Thursday approved $800 million World Bank loan request by President Bola Tinubu. This followed the consideration of the loan by the Committee of the Whole during Thursday's plenary. Remember that ex-President Muhammadu Buhari had, towards the tail end of his administration, forwarded the same request to the 9th Senate in May, which was not approved before the end of 9th Assembly tenure on June 11th. Tinubu, in a letter read by Senate President Godswill Akpabio earlier during plenary, asked the 10th Senate to approve the same borrowing request. The president in the letter explained that the loan will be used to scale up the National Social Safety Net program. Tinubu's letter reads, "Please note that the Federal Executive Council FEC, led by President Muhammadu Buhari, approved an additional loan facility to the tune of $800 million. This is to be secured from the World Bank for the National Social Safety Net program." Copy of FEC's extract is attached. You may also wish to note that the purpose of the facility is to expand coverage of shock-responsive safety net support among the poor and vulnerable Nigerians. This will assist them in coping with basic needs. You may further wish to note that under the conditional cash transfer window of the program, the federal government of Nigeria will transfer the sum of 8,000 naira per month to 12 million poor and low-income households. This is for a period of 6 months with a multiplier effect on about 60 million individuals. In order to guarantee the credibility of the process, digital transfers will be made directly to beneficiaries' accounts and mobile wallets. To refresh our memories, China to help with policing cybersecurity, says Solomon Islands. Syria approves delivery of aid from Turkey. Aung San Suu Kyi in good condition, says Myanmar. Putin offers Wagner forces chance to serve in Russia, and Putin warns about Western tank supply to Kyiv. That's all on the news. Thanks for watching. I am Lois Reiki. Have a beautiful weekend ahead.